Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today I want to talk with you again about the ColdSteel Recon 1. Now this is a particular version of the Recon 1, but before I get into my thoughts, I really want to ask you guys, what do you guys think of this knife? Because I'm about to make some really bold assertions about this knife, and I would love to hear you guys agree or disagree down in the comments, have a full discussion about this, because I'm going to suggest that when it comes to a hard use tactical folder, that really there is nothing better than the Recon 1, especially if you consider price per performance. All right, that's my assertion in this video. I would love to hear you discuss it down in the comments below, because I really feel like, if someone said to me, Kevin, I need a knife that can, serve as a firearm backup. It can work out in the bush. It can slice tomatoes. It can, make my kids lunches, and then it can also skin a deer later that day. I'm going to say you need a ColdSteel Recon 1. You really do. Now, are there other knives that would do that? Yes, there are, but I don't think you'll find one for the same price point. I really don't think so. So let's go ahead and get into this video, starting off with a little bit of background on this particular knife. This is not any old Recon 1. As you can see, it has a satin finish, flat ground blade. All the hardware is satin, including the clip, which is a bigger deal than you think because ColdSteel's coating on their clips is horrible. So the satin clip is actually a huge win, but this is the Blades Canada exclusive version. So if you want one just like this, or in the Tanto or the drop point, I guess spear point would be what they call it, you need to go over to Blades Canada, and it's going to cost you $149 Canadian plus shipping. If you're in the US, that's still cheaper than a standard paramilitary 2. I think with the exchange, you probably land around 120 bucks, okay? And maybe 130 bucks by the time you pay for shipping. So that's what this knife is. There are a couple of differences from the Recon 1 that I had before. It was still a clip point, but it did have a DLC coated blade, and it had a hollow grind, and it was in CTS XHP rather than S35 VN. Now, ColdSteel is switching to S35 VN, but not to a satin finish. So this is still an exclusive to Blades Canada. And I think, if I've got this right, they did 400 of each version. So there's 400 clip points, 400 Tantos, and 400 spear points available. All right, so that's the introduction. That's this knife in particular. But now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Recon 1 in general. And by the way, in addition to the Blades Canada link, I will put my own Amazon links to my store and to the links that will help the channel, both to Amazon.ca for Canadian viewers and to Amazon.com for those of you down in the US. So once I've sung this knife's praises for the next 20 minutes, you can go out and buy one of your own and be as excited about it as I am. Okay, so let's start with my initial assertion that when it comes to a hard use, heavy duty tactical folder, okay, and it doesn't have to be, just a heavy duty knife that could serve as a defensive tool if it really, really needed to. All right, I don't think there's anything better, especially for the price. I really don't. What we've got here is 9¼ inches of overall knife, almost 4 inches of S35 VN steel. It's attached to a super durable G10 handle with the strongest lock available in a folding knife. And that handle is actually really, really comfortable. I've got to tell you, even with the very grippy G10, which I would argue is a little too grippy, a little over the top, this is really comfortable, and you can do a lot of heavy duty cutting and not feel the least bit uncomfortable because of the way this handle is designed. It just fits great in hand. And so all of that for 90 bucks, if you're not getting the exclusive version, to me, that's a really, really good deal. Not only are you getting an excellent steel, either CTS XHP or S35 VN, but you're getting a blade that is nearly perfectly balanced. The only blade that I would argue is better balanced than this would be the blade on my Nkosi, okay? This is going to be strong and durable, and yet, well, I wouldn't hesitate to do light batoning with this or really bear down and push through some material with this. You could also, after doing that, just putting it really through its paces out in the bush, you could go home and slice up a tomato or a hot dog for your kids, and it would work just as well for that role. So the versatility of this blade and of the knife overall is where I really think it shines. Now, the one weakness that I do have is it's a little big for EDC. Now, here in Meaford where I am, I could carry this knife, I could use it, no problem. In fact, recently I was with the kids over in Collingwood. We were at a farmer's market and we got some lunch and I needed to cut up the food for the kids. I actually pulled out my Crooked River, which is just as big and just as, scary looking, and no one cared. All right. It wasn't even a deal. Now, if I was downtown Toronto, that might be a different story. If I was downtown, whatever city you live near, same thing. To me, the simple solution to that is, if I'm carrying a knife like this, I will sometimes carry a smaller, sort of less aggressive secondary folder. All right. Now, having given that one weakness, we will come back and address that in a couple of minutes when we get to comparisons. One of the comparisons I have is this, which of course is, just an EDC giant. And so we'll compare it to the Para 2 in a couple of minutes. Now, let me get back to knives that fit this particular genre, okay? A heavy duty, large, a large heavy duty folder that has at least the potential or at least some thought has been given to this being a weapon or being pressed into some kind of really hard heavy duty use in a survival or defensive situation. Okay. And when we start thinking about those knives, you come up with Zero Tolerance, you come up with Emerson, you come up with Microtech, the SOCOM specifically is what I'm thinking of there, maybe Hinderer, and there are a few others we could name. And when we start naming those though, honestly, which one of those would I take over the Recon One if I knew for sure that I was really going to have to use it? Okay, and the answer to that question is none of them, right? Let me throw in a couple of other blades here. So I've got, where's my other, there we go. So I've got a couple of ZTs here. Now the one I think compares best to the Recon One is not here, okay? I would feel like the closest comparison would be the 0560, which I also think is one of the best zero tolerance knives available. I don't have one here. I don't have one at all, in fact. But even the 0560, if you said, Kevin, you've got to go out to the bush, you got to get a fire ready, you've got to, fill in this list of tasks that I've got to do with my knife this day. Would you want a 560 or a Recon One? Honestly, with very few exceptions, I'm going to take a Recon One. Okay. I guess the one exception would be, are you going to take pictures for Instagram? Because there are some prettier knives out there, right? But and really neither of these, in terms of toughness, in terms of versatility, in terms of durability, these two don't compare to the Recon One. They really don't. I still love them. I think they're great knives. I carry them. I think they're fantastic. But if you would say to me, which one's going to take more of a beating and still be a useful tool, without question, we're talking about the Recon One. And again, guys, I would love to hear you disagree with me, but I would say that same thing about the Microtech SOCOM, about, the Emerson, all the CQC series and the Commanders and everything else that are really meant to be, heavy duty defensive weapons. Absolutely. Let me bring in another knife that really is close to this in size, in blade shape. The Crooked River is very, very similar to the Recon One, but consider, if nothing else, the price point. Okay, so in terms of use, in terms of what you can get done with these two knives, they're very close. Okay, they really are. Now, I have to grant the Recon One has better steel, which is kind of strange considering the price point on these two, but that's not the only thing, right? Even the lock is going to be better. All right, the lock, although the Axis lock is a great lock, I have a lot of faith in it. It's very strong. I have no question about that. It's not going to be as strong as a Triad lock. Now, maybe some people would favor the ease of use of the Axis lock over the Triad lock. To me, I've been using and carrying cold steel so much that I really don't notice a big difference. I guess the other thing would be action, right? If you're one of those guys who wants to flip your knife open and closed a whole bunch of times, yeah, the Axis lock is going to be better. But the elephant in the room in this comparison is the price point, okay? Just a bare bones. Now, as I have this here, this knife is probably about $300 US, maybe a little bit more than that. But even the standard bare bones Crooked River is close to $200 US, basically twice the price of the Recon One. And in terms of performance, it's not doing anything better. In fact, you're giving up some performance to go to the Crooked River. All right. So again, I love this knife. Don't get me wrong. Now, for those of you who are watching and who are loving some of the knives that I'm picking on here, don't get me wrong. I love these knives. This is one of my favorite knives in my collection without a doubt. Okay. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that when it comes to price per performance, that there really is nothing that's going to dominate the Recon One. Really, there isn't. Now, let's bring in some more expensive knives here. You know, here we have one of my favorite knives in the world, the Curtis F3. Another one of my favorite knives is the Hinderer XM18. Now, obviously, the blade shape on this one is going to be quite a bit different, and we should be comparing, you know, one of the either the slicer grind or the Spanto grind. But I bring these guys in to make another point, and that is, you know, if you are looking for just exceptional performance and something heavy duty that you can really, really use, you don't need to spend $500, right? I hear guys say this, you know, I've spent $1,000 on my sidearm and I depend on my knife just as much. And I think I've even made a similar argument to that. And so I can get why people pay the kind of money they pay for a really good folder. Okay. And there's no doubt that these are fantastic folders, but would I try to argue that in some significant way, either of these knives would outperform the Recon One? Would I try to make that argument? No. Okay, there are other things that they do better, no question, and there are reasons that I love these knives and in some ways like them more than the Recon One. But when it comes to performance and durability and usefulness and which one I'd rather have if I was really in a pinch, you know, I've really got to give a lot of credit to the Recon One. So there we are. So that's my first argument. My first argument about why I would buy a Recon One and why I highly recommend it is because in terms of price per performance, all right, there's really nothing that is going to beat it. There really isn't. Now, again, there are some cheaper knives out there, but you know, let's say I don't have my Rat Model 1 here today, and a Rat Model 1 will do most of the same stuff. But again, I still am not going to have the confidence in hand with a Recon 1, with a Rat 1 that I will with the Recon 1. Just isn't there. And so, first argument, when it comes to performance per dollar spent, you are really, really hard pressed to beat the Recon 1. You really are. Now, there's another side to this discussion, and that is as a knife reviewer, okay? As a knife reviewer, one of my jobs is, you know, if I'm sharing, say, this knife with you, which is a fantastic knife, and I absolutely love it, but I know that there's gonna be people watching who would look at this and go, yeah, I love the blade shape. It's beautiful. I love the carbon fiber. Just a fantastic knife. But Kevin, do you have any options for me that are going to do everything this knife does, but for half the price? And I've got to say, yeah, the Recon One. And that's going to be true of so many knives. It's stupid, right? So many knives that I review, I think to myself, I really should have a Recon One to compare this to because, you know, either it's lighter, it's cheaper, it's sharp, you know, it does a better job slicing. You know, it's one of those knives that for comparison's sake is, I think, really important for a reviewer to have because it does so many things really well, especially when compared to knives that are supposed to be like the best thing in the world at that particular job. And the Recon One will still often do it better. All right, so that's an important point that I also need to make. As a reviewer, I need to have those knives that are just outstanding examples of their particular category. Now, let me come back to the Para 2. All right, Para 2 is a fantastic everyday carry knife. It's a little smaller. It's definitely a little lighter. It's every bit as comfortable in hand. It's a little more expensive. All right, not a lot, but I think the going rate for Para 2s these days is like $130 something. I think that's MAP pricing now. If someone knows that off and wants to comment with it, that's great. And so, are you actually getting a better, more useful knife for the extra $40 you're spending over the Recon One? And I would say no. What you're getting is something that's maybe not quite as scary, not quite as intrusive to carry. And there are some knives that fit that really, really well. Okay, so you don't always want a huge, heavy-duty knife. So there's some EDC tasks, some light-duty tasks that these would do just as well. All right. However, It's one of those, you know, I would prefer to have it and not need it versus need it and not have it, right? Could I imagine scenarios in which I had a Para 2 but wished I had a Recon 1? Absolutely. Could I imagine a scenario in which I had a Recon 1 but wished I had a Para 2? Not that many. Okay. And in fact, I would say there's probably a better solution, which I do often utilize. And that is if I'm carrying something really big like this or the Crooked River or something else, the Formax, I will sometimes carry a small sort of secondary knife. Sometimes it's like a small slip joint, or it's one of those, you know, a little neck knife or something like that. That's not big and scary and tactical. That isn't going to upset anyone in the least. Okay. So I want to put that out there for sure, that there are some limitations on the Recon 1. And let me just add a couple of more limitations that do exist. All right. Could the G10 be just a little bit less aggressive? Yes. All right. Could the pocket clip be a little bit less tight? Absolutely. Okay. No argument from me whatsoever. Could the back lock have just a slightly lighter spring? Sure. Now, by the way, there is an easy way to lighten that spring, and that is if you buy this knife, open it partially like this and just leave it like that for a couple days, you'll find the lockup softens up quite a bit and it becomes much easier to deal with. Or, I mean, the same effect is going to happen over time. If you just wait, this will soften up a little bit. Now, not a lot, but it will soften up a little bit if that backlock is a real issue for you. So, we've now covered why I would buy this knife. We've talked about the fact that as a reviewer, it has great value. We've talked about the fact that, you know, as as a, you know, hard use folding knife that's really extremely versatile and can do everything that a knife should ever do, that it really shines in that department, and that it beats a lot of other knives that are supposed to fit into its genre, like ZTs and Microtechs and Emersons and stuff. You know, those are all, I think, fairly sustainable arguments. The one thing I will say is this: there's going to be some of you who go, Kevin, you are just like a rabid Cold Steel fanboy, and I can see why you could potentially think that, right? It's possible that I do have one or two Cold Steel knives that I really like and have given very positive reviews to, or even recommended an awful lot. And there are more. I don't have my American Lawman here, but that's a great knife I would highly recommend. I don't have a Talwar anymore, but that's a great knife I would recommend. I don't have a Broken Skull, but that's a great knife I would recommend. So, okay, so I can understand the accusation when it comes to my videos, my reviews, and my channels, why you would say, Kevin, you're just a Cold Steel fanboy. But let me push back on that just a little bit, and that's kind of how we'll end this. Again, I would love to hear you guys' feedback down below. Let me know why you think I'm completely out to lunch, or let me know what your favorite Cold Steel is and why, you know, I should be picking different ones or recommending different ones. But while I do like a lot of Cold Steel models, I would argue that I don't just blindly buy every knife they put out. I don't support them in everything that they do. In fact, in terms of, you know, their business and how they conduct themselves in the knife community, I really have a lot of problems with that. And I would not debate with anyone who said, yeah, sometimes they've done some really crappy stuff. Okay, they really have. And certainly their models for this year, I found just a complete disappointment. Like, there's nothing they have this year that I'm really excited about. So again, that's kind of sad to me. And those would be the reasons I would suggest I'm not just blindly, you know, praising everything Cold Steel does, because I really don't do that, or at least I try not to. Am I drawn to their knives? Do I like a lot of things about them? Yes, I do. I like the fact that they use just G10. I like the fact that their blades almost always slice. Okay, they definitely make harder use knives, but normally my issue with hard use knives is they don't cut things very well. Cold Steel almost always does, with the exception of the SR1. They're strong, they're reasonably priced, and so yeah, there are a lot of things I like about Cold Steel. There are especially a lot of things I like about the Recon 1, even over and above many of those other models that I just had on the table, and even better than a lot of the models that I mentioned. Okay, so There you go, guys. That is why I bought another Recon 1. That's why I put it in my videos. That's why I carry it. That's why I like it. That's why I would recommend it to you. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right. Certainly, I'm not claiming to know everything about every knife, and I know that there are problems, and it's not the most perfect knife that ever existed. I tried to at least touch on some of those weak points. I hope you had fun, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video and getting to see a bunch of knives and me making some bold claims about a pretty well-known knife. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.